I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Well, hello everyone and welcome once again to TGU. It's the weekly flagship program from VLGA Connect where we talk about all the things that are happening in and around the local government sector. Of course, it'd be boring if I just sat here and spoke about it all by myself. So I've got some friends to chat with. Tony Raunic from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, who also sponsor the program, is with us again. Hi, Tony.
G'day, Chris. I'd still tune in to watch you, Chris.
Oh, would you? I think that'd be really jumping the shark, sitting here on YouTube talking to myself. And Julie Reid is with us as well from Julie A. Reid and Associates. Hello, Julie.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Tony. And what a bumper week this has been.
It sure has. There's been a lot happening, hasn't there?
Yes.
So I hope you've both had a good week. I hope you're all well rested and full of energy to get through this big, long list of things, which I wanted to start with. And we'll come to Canberra in a moment because, of course, the National General Assembly's been on. But I did want to start with the King's Birthday Honours list, which came out on Monday. I did a count of the main list when it first came out and found no less than 35 references to local government. There were one or two more hiding away there. So local government very well represented, and quite a few from Victoria. Julie, a few people I'm sure that you've crossed paths with in your local government career as well.
Yes, Chris. And look, I was really pleased to see some of the Victorian councils be nominated on that list. In particular, I was interested in Councillor Kleinert from Manningham City Council. She's got an amazing background. She led the charge in establishing a youth mental health outreach service for Manningham with Headspace in Hawthorn. And I just think that that's the type of stuff that really makes a difference in local communities. And we know how much our youth are struggling, particularly post-COVID. She's an amazing ambassador for that space. So I know that she's been involved with Bully Zero, and she's a real great advocate, I think, and a champion for Manningham. So just wanted a shout out for her, and think it's fantastic that we've got councillors that are being recognised and also staff members as well. So
well, yes, we'll come to the staff member in just a moment, but just while we're on councillors, and I'm sure you've crossed paths with a few of these as well, Tony, particularly pleased to see Malcolm Hole honoured, who passed away a couple of years ago, of course, now was in office at the time at Wellingtonshire. And I know the people down in Wellingtonshire are quite chuffed that he's been recognised posthumously this way.
Yeah. Look, I'm not surprised that there are so many local government identities recognised in this way. Of course, there's so many people involved in local government who are just, really great at the grassroots of community and really doing amazing things. So it's appropriate that we see them recognised in the honours list. I went through looking for our names, Chris and Julie, didn't find them in there, but maybe next year. But
I don't know why you
some well-deserving people in that list, as you say, some councillors and some council officers as well.
So just a couple to mention. We won't go through the whole list from a Victorian perspective. Lord Mayor Sally Capp, of course, with an AO. Robert Gersh, who's a councillor at Hindmarsh and a former mayor. Heather Marcus, who I crossed paths with a few times in the West, former mayor at Wyndham, has been recognised with an OAM. Rose Hodge, councillor at Surf Coast. Julie mentioned Michelle Kleinert. Rob Steen, who's currently serving as mayor at Maroondah. And John Kavanagh, a former councillor and two-time mayor at the city of Moreland, as it was back then. And you both mentioned the staff member. I thought this was lovely. The staff member at Bass Coast Shire, Ella Angarani, I hope I'm saying that right, is a council recreation and open space planner, but she's been recognised for the work she's done to further gender equality in Australian rules football, because she founded the Bass Coast Breakers Women's Football Club, and she's the president and the coach. Sounds like she's the lifeblood of that team.
I think she's the stalwart down there. I checked them out, the Bass Coast Breakers, Div 2 in the Southeastern Women's League, runners up last year to Warragul, and their win-loss ratio, I think they're 7-5 or 7-6 or something so far this year, Chris and Julie. So well done to Ella, and isn't it great to see where women's football has come over the last few years in terms of the profile, and it's people, as I say, like Ella in those communities at a grassroots level who are really responsible for this as much as some of the peak bodies like the AFL are.
And Chris, she's an amazing role model for the women down there at Bass Coast in the community, and is the leader of the future. So good on her, and great that she's got some recognition for it.
I think it's also great recognition that a lot of council officers, that they work in local government because they want to make a difference in their local communities. We see this so much, and they're doing so much more than just their day-to-day job with their councils, which I think is something you see a lot around the local government sector. And well done to Ella for setting an example. I'm just going to jump over a couple of items in the story list, guys, because while we're talking about winners, the national awards for local government were announced this week in Canberra at the National General Assembly, or as in tandem with that event. And Victoria, once again, has fared really well in these awards, starting with our friends out at the City of Melton. Julie?
Yes, won the category of productivity through infrastructure for developing the moving Melton transport prospectus. I'm quite interested in having a look at that project, Chris. It sounds really interesting, and good on Melton for coming up with something that wins a national award. So fantastic piece of work, and I'm really keen to get my hands on it.
I did talk on the Roundup recently about the Paddock Run podcast or vodcast, I think it is, that's been produced out at Bullockshire. This is all related to their flood recovery efforts. Well, it's been recognised with an award in the Disaster Preparedness Award. So I know Travis Fitzgibbon and the team there will be absolutely chuffed to be recognised with that award. Well done to them. Any of them jump out at you, Tony?
No, I'm not really across them at the moment, but I did hear about that. What did you call it? Vodcast?
Vodcast. So basically, you're on one. You're on one right now, Tony.
There we
this
go.
Is a vodcast. Yeah.
Oh, gee, I'm really with it then, aren't I? But no, what a great thing that's occurring there with councils using different forms of media to get out to the community and tell a story.
Absolutely. Mount Alexander Shire won the award for Indigenous recognition. Glen Ira won the award for addressing violence against women and their children. That's for an intervention service for vulnerable mothers called Glen Ira Mums. There were some obviously other winners from other states. I'll talk about those on the Local Government News Roundup, but there's a story from the Mandarin which nicely summarises all those winners. So well done to all of those people representing local government so well with those projects this year. Back to home and more serious news. Interesting story this week, Tony, in the Herald Sun about a complaint that we believe has been lodged with the local government inspectorate about, it's about lobbying and potential conflicts of interest at the City of Stonington. I've got a bit of a view about this, but I'd like to get yours first, Tony.
Yeah, interesting one. The background being a study that I think was commenced in about 2019 at Stonington in relation to reviewing heritage controls in suburbs like Toorak, Armidale, Kooyong. The outcome of that study was a recommendation that about 130 particular properties be included within a heritage overlay. And that resulted in one of the affected landowners, turns out they have a development background, own a property in Armidale called Tudor Lodge. Sounds pretty nice. It's a double-story 1930s, pretty posh place. But that landowner engaged professional lobbyists who lobbied councillors in relation to having that property removed from the list for inclusion in the heritage overlay. And there was an unsuccessful amendment motion brought to take that property out of the list. The motion failed on the casting vote of the mayor, I believe, and what we've learnt now from subsequent this media report is there's apparently a complaint's been lodged with the local government inspectorate alleging misuse of position by councillors in terms of supporting that proposed amendment to remove Tudor Lodge from the list. Sounds strange, a bit strange to me. Section 123 of the Local Government Act deals with misuse of position, and it involves, a councillor, improperly using their position to advantage themselves or another person, merely sort of responding positively to some lobbying, being persuaded by a view out there, even if it's put professionally to them, in itself, to me, wouldn't necessarily amount to misuse of position, but perhaps there's something else in the detail we're not aware of. Normally, you'd need to establish some, inappropriate use of confidential information that had come to the council only through their position being improperly used. So not really sure whether this is a storm in a teacup or there's more to it than was reported.
My view entirely, Tony, I wondered what more there could be to this, because on the face of it, isn't it the councillor's job to listen to all of the various views that are presented and to keep an open mind, not have a predetermined view, and then reach a position based on all the information available to them? It just so happens that these, I think, 2 councillors reached the view that accorded with the person that had been lobbying. Big deal.
Well, I think more than that, in fact, given that it failed on a casting vote. But
exactly, and
just because in this case the lobbying was coming from someone professionally engaged, it'd seem inequitable to me if you just refuse to listen to it on that basis. As you say, role of council to listen to the views in the community and then make a determination.
Julie, a bit of a slippery slope here, do you think, or can you see where these folks are coming from?
Oh, look, I suppose I'm going to come from a different perspective and talk about how hard it is for councils in this heritage space. This is becoming more and more difficult as land becomes more and more precious, as people become more and more wanting to have their own control over their own land and not have controls put on them through heritage overlays, for example. These are battles that councils are having, across the country, and particularly in Melbourne and inner Melbourne. And it's becoming very, very hard for councils to navigate through without lots of emotion and lobbying that goes on, with this kind of control. Planning is hard enough as it is for local government to navigate through, but heritage is, probably one step harder than getting through, normal planning procedures. So, look, I'm struggling to understand, where there's justification for this complaint to the local government inspectorate. But I feel for the council, and I'm actually thinking, wow, isn't it great that the council have had that debate, come to a conclusion, and not necessarily sort of finish the situation where they haven't been able to make a decision, or they've been, dysfunctional in their decision making on this one, because this is a tough decision for councils to make when they're being lobbied.
Yeah, and as you say, particularly in the heritage space, you can understand owners of heritage properties that feel hamstrung about what they can or can't do by virtue of the fact that they have a property that has heritage value. The thing that jumped out at me, Tony, was the line that says, the lobbying was not illegal, but raised concerns about councillors leaving themselves open to outside influence and selectively overriding council recommendations. It misses the point that council recommendations are just that. And as frustrating as it can be for officers to have recommendations not followed at times, that's the role of the councillor, to weigh all of that up and, if necessary, if they feel appropriate, make an alternative decision.
Yeah. I think that the tone of the article was, they listened to someone with a bit of money, who could afford a professional lobbyists, but you'd probably expect that in an area like Armidale, and what we're talking about, a mansion here. So no, I don't see anything to be criticised in terms of councillors listening to the representations they receive from the community. And if in this case this was only one of a few representations, then understandably that was where councillors would have had their attention focused.
Well, I'm sure we probably won't hear anything from the inspectorate on this. I imagine it'll just go away, but let's wait and see. As we say, there might be other factors there we're not aware of. A quick classified ad before we move on. This portion of the program is brought to you by the VEC, who are looking for election managers, and we're not being paid for this announcement, but I just did note this week that they have put out a call for interested and appropriately qualified, I assume, people who'd like to do. I think this would be a great job, actually. I'd like to do this in another life, be an election manager, but it's a big commitment. It's 4 months to run the election program for a particular council area in the lead up to and just after the elections in October next year. So they're getting in early. But I reckon between us, we could probably come up with a list of people we reckon to do a good job at this. Tony, Julie?
I've already texted someone to say,
good.
You're in.
Excellent. All right. Well, they've got to put their hand up, of course.
It's probably a good reminder for some of those councils that don't have councillors that, now's the time to be pulling out the council staff interaction policy from however many years ago and brushing that up a bit and sort of perhaps engaging with some of the staff about, you mightn't have worked with councillors before. What's the, get some role clarity in there, who's responsible for what. Because will be a big change in the dynamic at some councils when councillors arrive post those 2024 elections.
All right. So if anyone listening to us thinks they'd like to put their hand up for one of those jobs with the VEC as an election manager, they can go to vec.vic.gov.au/jobs to find out more. I've been thinking a lot about homelessness lately, Tony and Julie, because I had a chat with Leanne Mitchell, who's a manager at Brimbank City Council and has come back from a recent Churchill Fellowship research study looking at how councils in other parts of the world are tackling homelessness. Spoiler alert, she didn't find a silver bullet, but you can listen to that interview on the Roundup special episode for June called Council Conversations. But timely, a report's just come out from the, just let me get their name right, I think it's the Council to Homeless Persons, which has dug into the statistics from the last census and done some comparison from the previous census. And it's pretty stark in Victoria, particularly. I know it's a problem everywhere, but the southwest, South Barwon region, 456% increase over that 5-year period. It's staggering in terms of numbers of homeless persons.
Just a huge issue. And I think many of us would think, the problems in the CBD where we see people, sleeping outside railway stations and such, but actually turns out that it's in the outer metropolitan suburbs. It's in the regional areas where, you have people who are in crisis accommodation. They're sleeping in cars. They're couch surfing, and just a widespread problem. I think last census night there was 124,500 people in Victoria who were homeless. I saw an article this week about the Commonwealth Games coming up in 2026 and the opportunity that might provide for, in terms of the athlete accommodation we'll be constructing. I think Ballarat, the old sale yards in Latrobe Street, Geelong at Mount Dunedin, Bendigo, Flora Hill, and also in Morwell, there's athletes villages planned for about 7,000 athletes. And there's an opportunity here to maybe build, construct those facilities, design them in a way that provides social and affordable housing into the future. It seems that those regions are really screaming out for that sort of housing. And last Commonwealth Games in Australia was the Gold Coast, 2018. It seems there was an opportunity missed there, and we might do some forward planning this time around.
Interesting one. I missed that story, Tony. Julie, the reason I brought this up today is I'm seeing more and more stories of how councils are in a bit of a sticky situation in dealing with homelessness, because it's not a fundamental primary responsibility of councils, but communities expect I think councils to be able to do something about it. And often it seems to be that communities are expecting councils to move the problem on, or as Leanne said to me in the interview, to do something about it. We've had an instance in Byron where there's been lots of complaints about a particular park area being used by homeless people. We've had, I think, the city of Logan in Queensland, where they've moved them from one location to another and faced some criticism for that. And this one caught my eye this week out of Sunshine Coast, where 4 tiny homes were put up on one particular property and there's people living in them, and someone complained. The council planners have looked at it and said, well, it doesn't comply, there's no permit, and they've been issued with eviction notices. And understandably, people are saying, how can you do that in the middle of a housing crisis? Councils are between a rock and a hard place sometimes, Julie.
Yeah, they are. And it is interesting, this case that you're talking about in Queensland, where the Sunshine Coast had to respond to a complaint from a member of the community. And now
a neighbour from this property.
Yeah, that's right. And now this mum with children has to move out of this tiny home on a property, and it's got nowhere to go, you know. And so it's a very emotional issue, but it's all about the planning controls. It's all about whether or not they've got permission for it. Well, they don't, so they need to get permission for it. And so in the meantime, they're having to evict this mum and her children. So it's sort of a, you know, planners normally are very socially conscious. And, you know, it would be very hard, I think, in a situation like this, to go hard on, you know, an enforcement matter when you know that it's going to impact someone in that way, and you're just going to move the problem on, as you say. And when councils find themselves in a situation where, say, there are homeless people, you know, lying in a civic precinct, all they end up doing is calling the police and getting them to move them on, and it just moves the problem somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting the planning system is so cut and dry around things like that, and whether or not there needs to be some kind of review of whether there could be exemptions for situations like this potentially. How you could enforce that is probably pretty hard to work out. But look, there's a housing crisis. We know that there's a shortage of housing, and there's a lot of housing being used for Airbnb, and there's been a big debate around the lack of housing as a result of Airbnb. Look, there's a circle, a vicious circle there of planning controls, Airbnb. What do you do with these people? How do you support them as a council? It's really hard.
As always, it takes time for the legislative framework to catch up with the realities on the ground, but we are seeing a lot of talk and a lot of action in some places in dealing with the short stay accommodation issues. And I know at least one councillor up there on the Sunshine Coast is calling on the officers for some compassion to review that decision, to try and find other solutions. Difficult space to be in, Tony.
Julie summed it up. I absolutely, council's got this responsible authority role, but of course, you know, needs to consider the broader needs of the community. And, you know, it's just a broader debate that we're having. And, you know, it seems that opportunities to provide social and affordable housing are front of mind at a state government level and a federal government level across Australia. And you know, no doubt we're going to see at a local level some regulatory changes to basically smooth the way.
Yeah.
And I think Chris, there's an opportunity in the planning system, and a lot of councils are doing this really well, to negotiate that social and affordable housing mix with developers. Some councils are really going hard in that space. There's some good work going on at Yarra City Council around that. So, you know, I think it's councils shouldn't underestimate how much they might be able to influence developers in that space when they've got big developments in front of them.
All right, good discussion on that point. I'm sure it won't be the last time that that comes up. I'm going to jump one on your running sheet, guys, because I want to, while we're talking legal issues, get Tony's take particularly. You might recall a couple of months ago, I think now, we talked about Philip Ruddock's council, Hornsby Council, was taking some action in the High Court to look at the way councils are charged and paid GST. I think they call it Notional GST, and the idea is that as councils pay those GST amounts, they're offset from future grant funding that comes from the Commonwealth. This had the potential to really shake up the way GST was treated at the local government level, but they've lost the case this week in the High Court, Tony.
Yeah. Hornsby Council's lost that case. And as you say, Philip Ruddock, the mayor, had a few wins as, a Howard government minister, but it hasn't been successful on this one. As you say, it's about the what they call notional GST treatment. I think the example that was put forward in the case was the sale of a Holden, Colorado utility by council and a 3,000 odd notional GST liability, which they, included and remitted in their business activity statement. Look, tax is complicated, but my understanding of this is that councils either remit the notional GST, or, as you say, there's an equivalent adjustment in the next round of Commonwealth funding. So the High Court decided here that because there wasn't a compulsion, there wasn't a legal a piece of legislation that required council to remit that notional GST, that the challenge would fail. Because essentially the arrangement was through some intergovernmental agreement that was has roots back to 1999. That makes me think, well, a council's compelled to do this at all. The High Court's saying they're not, but presumably there's still this funding implication if they fail to follow this reporting notional GST on their BAS process. But I don't think it's if the decision had gone another way, there might well have been sector-wide implications, and someone will pull apart this High Court decision who understands tax law better than me, but not a win for Hornsby Shire in this one.
As you say, the High Court found that they weren't compelled to make that payment. That I had the same thought as you. Does that give rise to another avenue to try and challenge the way this system is working from a local government point of view?
Yeah, and that's, I guess it's the interface between, we're not compelled, but we signed we voluntarily entered into an agreement that said if we do this, there'll be this implication. If we don't do this, there'll be another implication. But look, I think it'd be back to the back to the books for the Hornsby's legal advisors on this one, and we'll see whether there's a revised approach.
It occurs to me that the cost of taking that High Court action probably is far and away more than the notional GST amounts that any particular council would incur in a given year.
That's probably right. Although when we add it up across the sector, I guess there are other contributors to the action that Hornsby put its name to. But hadn't thought of that. Perhaps the cost has been shared. All right. Did you want to add anything, Julie, or will we move on? Yep. Okay.
Yes,
let's go to.
not for me.
Let's go to. I thought you might say that. Let's go to an announcement that just came out this morning as I was putting the final touches on the running sheet. A new $100 million energy efficiency fund has been announced this week in Canberra by the Prime Minister, no less. This is for councils to plug in, as they say, according to press reports this morning, a fund to make swimming pools, sporting grounds and courts more energy efficient. So this is got to be good news for the sector.
Chris, can I just say, look, overall it's good news, but, the headline is local councils will be able to apply for money to make swimming pools, sporting grounds more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. Some councils are struggling with the swimming pools as it is, the assets.
Yeah.
The amount of swimming pools that I have seen across Victoria that have been closed down because they can't afford to bring them up to repair or to replace them. That's the issue. You know, that is the real issue out there. Swimming pools are closing down. Rural councils can't afford to rebuild them. You know, that's what they need the money for if they need a swimming pool locally. Look, this is all great. Energy efficiency, we need to do this. It's all, you know, it's all heading in the right direction. But there's a fundamental shortage of funding for the replacement of assets.
And a really good point you raise. And when you think about it, $100 million across the nation, 537 councils, it's not going to go very far.
Nope.
Okay. Nope, says Julie. We might leave that one there. Thank you. Salisbury councillors in South Australia have finally been removed. Those two councillors we've been talking about, not for their abhorrent absurd behaviour in recent months, but because they didn't turn up to, I think it was 3 consecutive council meetings in a row. We talked about this being the likely outcome, Tony, and now there's going to be by-elections at Salisbury because there's 2 councillor vacancies.
You're right. We saw this coming, Chris, and you know, the majority of councillors at Salisbury weren't convinced by whatever submissions were put on behalf of those councillors to explain their, you know, their absenteeism at I think 3 council meetings in a row. So yes, look to 2 by-elections in Salisbury.
Unanimous decision in both of those cases by that council in a confidential session that occurred on Tuesday night, and the outcome was revealed on Wednesday morning. Heading further west in Western Australia, where we know there's a new premier, there's a new cabinet, there's now a new local government minister, and continuing a trend that we're seeing around the country in quite a few states now, the new local government minister is a former councillor, and in this case, a deputy mayor from the city of Stirling. So that's got to be good news, Julie, for Western Australian councils, surely.
A sterling appointment, that's all I can say.
And we should say the previous Minister, John Carey, also had a local government background and was very, very active, particularly in leading these reforms, the tranche of reforms that we're seeing in Western Australia at the moment. I'm assuming David Michael, the new minister, will continue with those. City of Stirling's pretty chuffed. They put out an announcement this week congratulating the former deputy mayor of their city, David Michael, on ascending to that local government portfolio and joining the cabinet there in WA. Another interstate story that caught my eye, Tony, a councillor in, sorry, not a councillor, a CEO in Alexandrina Council has published an open letter to vandals who've been running riot around the municipality for nearly 12 months, $100,000 in costs to deal with the graffiti. And a lot of that graffiti has been particularly nasty about the council. And the CEO says, you need to man up and come and have an open and robust conversation with me. Is that the right approach?
Yeah, well, I think it's worth a try. I'm glad you described them as vandals, not graffiti artists. I don't think there was any artistic merit in
I don't think so.
Some of the stuff they've been putting up, and you know, good on the CEO for, you know, clearly attempting a proactive approach. The typical approach with graffiti is remove it as fast as you can, so that, you know, the perpetrators don't get any sort of enjoyment of seeing you know, their work posted for all to see for long periods. But you know, good on the CEO at Alexandrina to you know, making a public call for, you know, let's have a discussion. What's going on here? If you've got issues, let's not use public buildings, sites that the community use as a forum for, you know, putting your views on walls. Come forward and let's tell us what your issues are.
You can understand the frustration. Julie, you've been a CEO, as have I. It's got to be one of the most annoying things that gets you so angry when, you know, you deliver these wonderful facilities for community use and enjoyment, and some idiot comes along, and in this case, you know, they've put expletives, we won't repeat the language, on playgrounds, at school sites, etc. it does beg a belief and gets very frustrating about how to deal with it.
Yeah, it does, Chris. And look, I wouldn't be able to guess how much is allocated in this kind of cleanup across Victorian local government. It must be huge. And it's something that the community expect to clean up. Yes, and I agree, it needs to be cleaned up, but it is just such a waste of money. I mean, that money could be channeled into providing services to the local community. And it's just, it's so frustrating. It'd be interesting to hear that CEO's strategy as to what they're planning to say or do if that person does decide to come in and say, okay, what do you want to talk to me about? What's the strategy around, would they then say, okay, can we give you a space in which you can, do some graffiti art? Or, what is the strategy? So that'd be really interesting, because I think that whilst it sounds interesting that offer is on the table, you'd need to have a pretty clear plan about how you are going to tackle it.
Yeah, I think they can strategize all they like. I don't think they'll be putting it into action, because I can't see them taking him up on his invitation. But well done to Nigel Morris on taking that stand. But I can't imagine anyone's going to come forward and say, I'm the vandal. I'd like to have the conversation that you've offered me.
That's right. So how do you get to them? How do you get to them then? You've got to speak their own language. And so you've got to find someone that speaks the same language that might be able to influence them in some sort of way. Yeah. So first of all, you've got to understand or find out who it is and then speak their own language. So they're not going to, you're right, they're not going to speak to a CEO.
Another one that caught my eye this week out of Queensland, a council has seen the need, a mayor, to bring forward a notice of motion of confidence in the management team and the staff after one of the councillors made, I think it was around 20 accusations at the previous council meeting about fabrications of minutes, lack of transparency, etc. Comments that have led to quite a bit of nasty comment back at council staff, etc. These councillors, I think rightly so, have taken a stand. Have you seen this happen before, Tony, from a legal standpoint?
No, I haven't seen. We often hear of motions of no confidence, but I haven't seen this approach. But was interested that this was carried unanimously. So even apparently the councillor who'd raised these allegations and concerns has voted in support of the motion of confidence. So, I would think that delivers a clear message to the Southern Downs council staff and organisation that, you do have the support of the council group. And whilst one councillor might have raised some concerns about some minutes, it seems to be constrained to that discrete issue, and there's unanimity in terms of support for the organisation, which is good.
Yeah, and good to see the action being taken, because we're seeing a lot more of. I think what am I trying to say? It's a bit of a give them an inch, they'll take a mile with these people in the community that are challenging the whole system, disrupting council meetings, not respecting process, etc. You've got Tamworth and Scenic Rim, another Queensland council, that have made pretty strong statements about this in the last week or so. Tamworth has brought in a new banning policy to stop certain individuals from entering council facilities. Scenic Rim has said our zero tolerance policy is being reaffirmed. I know we've talked about this before, but Julie, right across the country and indeed overseas, we're seeing the rise of the disruptors, and councils are needing to really draw a line in the sand.
That's right, Chris. And some councils are making really good decisions to protect their councillors and staff from this bullying and harassment that's going on. Concerns about this abusive behaviour is well-founded. Nobody should be having to put up with this. And so to take that kind of stand publicly and make it really, really clear that there's zero tolerance is really a good way forward. What it does is it ensures good governance and it ensures good cultures within local government. But, we're seeing a trend of this. If councils can hold strong on this and unite on this, I think it's going to be very powerful. Let's hope it sort of is a blip and it goes away. Don't know.
It's interesting with the draft banning policy, which of course reminds us that the council has the power to exclude people from council property. It's always had that power, and in this instance, with the policy that's out for consultation in Tamworth, that if council believes that from previous behaviour that somebody is likely to be a danger to members of the public, council staff, or indeed to the building itself, then they can be banned from attending the building. But how do you practically enforce that? Doesn't that mean that when people enter the gallery for a council meeting, we have to get their ID, we have to take down their name? Because if we're going to ban someone in the future, we need to know who they are. We need to know that they gave the correct name. So we may end up seeing, the majority suffer through, the sins of the minority here, where you go along to a council meeting and you have to provide some ID. You have to provide your details, but you got to do that when you go and inspect a property for sale these days, for auction, a residence. It's probably not that much of a burden on the community.
Okay, moving on, a couple more stories just to quickly run through. Just across the border in New South Wales, Federation Council. This is the council that was merged out of Corowa and I think Urana Shires back a few years back. The council has held a special meeting to consider a motion to conduct a financial health check. They're saying, the mayor at least is saying, this is not about wanting to de-amalgamate, but this is the first step on a potential path towards that, as has been followed at Snowy Valleys, where they're considering a similar report this month, which may or may not lead to a desire to demerger, but as has happened at Cootamundra-Gundagai, where it is actually resulting in a demerger to take effect next year. So, Tony and Julie, the scorecard on the merged councils in New South Wales is starting to tip towards the unsuccessful column.
Yeah, 2016, I think, was when they went through that process, and there were a lot of as been part of the rationale with Federation Council, there was statements made by politicians and that at the time to say this would lead to significant efficiencies, savings for the community, better local governance. In Federation Council's case, they're now, 7 years later saying, well, let's undertake the independent study and let's see what have been the outcomes. Has what was promised actually been delivered? And that'll be interesting.
It's very clear, and I did listen to the debate of the council on this motion, that some of those councillors do not believe it has delivered efficiencies and that it has worked. So, Julie, one to watch.
Yes, it is, Chris. And I've been talking to some CEOs recently that have come from the New South Wales experience. And they've got experience in seeing the amalgamations and de-amalgamations. They're being called down to talk to people in Tasmania at their conference down there to say, hey, tell us what's happening in New South Wales. How come a lot of them now are going towards de-amalgamation? Why didn't it work, etc. So the Tasmanians are seeking information about all of this at the moment because, they're obviously concerned about what's going on down there at the moment.
Well, they are. There's a host of options being floated. I saw one small council, Tasman Council, the mayor this week saying, if this super council that's proposed goes through, we're going to lose our voice. There probably won't be a representative on the council. We'll be totally absorbed as a community. So those sort of concerns are already coming out. Of course, no final decision's been made there yet, but that's coming in the next month or two, couple of months, I think. Okay, a couple of overseas stories, a bit of an update from New Zealand, where Gore Council, we've talked about the petition of nearly 5,000 signatures to call on the CEO to resign. The council, I think sensibly, ultimately refused to accept that petition on a number of grounds, one being legality, the employment of the CEO is private matter, not something that can be determined by petition. But also, apparently, a lot of the names on the petition couldn't be verified and were duplicated. Tony, interesting thing here is the motion was put to not receive the petition. All of the councillors voted for that, except for the mayor.
Yeah, and I believe that the relationship between the mayor and the CEO is very strained at this particular council. And but is this where we're going now? Instead of having these employment performance review, contractual discussions in a proper professional way behind closed doors, is it? We're going to an orchestrated community campaign where we have this public petitioning. I wouldn't have thought so. So I'm glad that certainly for the majority of councillors there, they weren't persuaded to go down this public path, and rightly so, I would think. I think you mentioned some of the signatures. I think the CEO or someone with the CEO's name actually appeared several times on the petition.
Is that right?
You'd hardly think that the CEO was signing this petition. So there might have been a bit of shenanigans in terms of the names that went on there.
I suspect it's not the last we'll hear out of Gore. That story's been going on for a few months. And as you say rightly, Tony, the relationship between the CEO and the mayor had completely broken down. There was an intermediary appointed by the council to work between the two, and we spoke on our last episode, I think, about the origins of that petition, which had connections to one of the councillors and to the mayor's mother. But anyway, no need to go over all of that again. Here's one I'm sure that you'll find upsetting, Julie, from your time in the UK. The good old ice cream van is being banned from the middle of Greenwich Council, and some people aren't very happy about this. I
know, poor old Mr. Whippy. Although I should say, poor old Mr. Frieze. Mr. Frieze is the one that's in bother. Yes, the London borough of Greenwich, which is a very popular tourist spot where I will be heading when I head over to the UK this year, have banned the Mr. Frieze, ice cream trucks in streets, over 30 streets apparently. So it must be a big business there, and the residents have had a gutful. They've just said, no, we're just fed up with the nuisance. We're fed up with the air quality. So
it's not a gutful of ice cream. It's not a gutful of ice cream that they've had.
No. I think they've probably got some pretty fancy ice cream shops down in Greenwich. You know what the explosion of ice cream shops has been in Melbourne. I could imagine that they're just as popular in Greenwich. Perhaps
the vans are, the idling of the ice cream vans is affecting the Royal Observatory clock. It is
Could
Greenwich.
be.
Oh, yes.
Vibration? I don't know.
I'm a thinker.
And, they made this at their cabinet meeting, they made this decision, and, whilst it's a popular tourist destination, they're basically saying that, there's visual clutter, it's creating bottlenecks, we need to get rid of them. They're suggesting ice cream vendors could still trade in the borough for up to 15 minutes on streets which are not exempt. So there's a lot of streets in Greenwich. So it doesn't kill the ice cream trade, but it's managing it to a point where it's probably a compromise to try and address the issues of the local residents. So
certainly taking them away from those more highly trafficked tourist areas by the sounds of it. All right, I'm going to make that my pick of the week and jump to Tony for your pick of the week, which is also about a ban that may or may not be working.
Yeah, 30-year anniversary this year of a ban at Northern Grampians Shire Council. A ban on cats. You can't have a cat if you reside in Halls Gap. Halls Gap, of course, surrounded by the beautiful sanctuary Gary Word, or some of us would remember it as the Grampians. Cats have been banned in Halls Gap since 1993. $100 fine if you're caught keeping a cat. Seems it was a controversial decision initially, but over the fullness of time, people have accepted it. The mayor of Northern Grampians has been reported. Councillor Kevin Irwin has come out in the media recently, pretty profound statement saying, well, it must be working because there aren't a lot of cats that are observed in Halls Gap. So we haven't got any studies as to, whether that ban has led to a reduction in, the killing of native animals, for example. But certainly a different approach than the 24-hour curfew that many councils have taken, and seems to have been accepted in Halls Gap.
I didn't realise that was in place, and it's been in place for quite some time. So there you go. Good to hear that they feel that is working. That comes as more and more councils are looking at some form of cat curfew. Geelong's the latest to call for feedback on its current arrangements, with some talk about perhaps moving to stronger curfews in the not too distant future. And Julie, your pick of the week this week is calling good old Facebook and social media into question again.
I know, Chris, I just sigh every time I see these reports about Facebook, and I just go, why do councillors do this stuff? I just don't understand. It's so much in the public eye.
So what's happened, Julie? Tell us.
This has happened in Western Australia. The State Administrative Tribunal has ordered the former City of Cockburn councillor Leanne Smith, OAM, to issue a public apology to the former Cockburn Council CEO Stephen Kane. This is over a conduct issue dating back to 2019. Now, Stephen Kane's no longer the CEO there. He's moved on, and she's a former councillor, I believe. There's this public apology. What's happened is that she's used Facebook to make derogatory statements and offensive comments towards the CEO.
Yeah.
So, it's obviously taken a long time for this to get to this point. So a lot of water under the bridge, but still, good on the tribunal for following up with this and making her make a public apology to the former CEO. This is not respectful behaviour. This is the kind of stuff we need to stomp out. And councillors, please, look at Facebook and use Facebook appropriately, because it will bring you unstuck, like this has clearly shown.
It's disappointing, isn't it? This particular Cockburn councillor, Leanne Smith, is an OAM and has been a deputy mayor, was on the council for more than 10 years. You would think was experienced enough not to fall into that sort of trap, but it just goes to show you, Tony, that anyone in the heat of the moment can perhaps go a little too far. Yeah,
look, there's a whole series of episodes on social media we could run. It does seem to be the source of lots of code of conduct concerns, complaints, and as you say, it's the 24/7 medium that councillors late at night can make posts, respond to posts, and once they're up there, they're the damage is often done, and very problematic. Very problematic. They're often late at night, aren't they? Or after midnight. No good posts or good emails seem to come with a 2 a.m. timestamp in my experience. That'd be the rule of thumb, I think, or if you've got a glass of anything alcoholic in your hand, don't log on. Put it down and use both hands to type. Is that what you're saying? All right. We might call it quits there. That's been another bumper list of things to get through, and I've left a few on the cutting room floor there for the sake of time. But as always, really enjoy getting your insights on the news of the week. Julie Reid, thank you very much as always. Have a great week, won't you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm heading down to Warrnambool next week, so I'm looking forward to meeting up with Warrnambool CEO and training some staff down there across the region. So road trip to Warrnambool next week.
Give our regards to the reasonably new CEO there at Warrnambool. I hope he's going well. And Tony, thank you as always, and I hope you've got a busy week ahead of you as well. Oh, absolutely. We race to the end of the financial year. A lot of fun. Thank you very much, Tony Raunic and Hunt Lawyers, for your support for the program, and Julie Reid back again next week, all being well, to do it all again here on TGU, and we hope you'll be with us then as well. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or your podcast player to make sure you don't miss a thing from VLGA Connect. Until next time, bye for now.